Okay, here we go. See what we got going here. Yeah, so this is sort of a celebration live stream where I have 1,000 subscribers, and I have my assistant Grok to write papers for me. So he comes up with a lot of information I wouldn't otherwise have. So let's go to the videotape. Let's go to Grok here. Okay. Now I was trying to fix this up where I could use this here, but gonna have to do it this way, I guess. Seems to be working okay. All right, it's good. I don't know why this is like that. There we go. How does this work? Try again. Okay, sorry for the delay. So we got a rapid continental breakup. A lot of people I've been talking about it on creationist videos on Standing for Truth channel about the global flood and the breakup. The ordinary creationist narrative is that the continents broke apart, which is what flooded the earth. But I believe the evidence shows a little bit more detailed series of events. So this is the paper here that Grok helped me to write so that we can put all this evidence in one place and look at it straightforward and objectively as possible. So we got a rapid continental breakup post-flood. Evidence from the Burckle Crater. We got the Gondwana glacial striations, animal separation, sediment layers, fossils, Arctic ecosystems, and wide DNA S&P markers, which was the dispersal of mankind after the Tower of Babel. So in other words, mankind did not disperse because they were building the Tower of Babel. The animals did disperse, but not all the animals arrived everywhere in the world, of course, because they went different directions. But some of the animals were separated, which to me is very significant evidence, even more so than maybe animals that are unique to, say, South America or Asia or Australia or something like that, is the animals that were separated since the time of the flood, or shortly after the time of flood, say 100 years or so after the flood. So approximately 100, 150 years after the global flood, 4,350 BC, during Peleg's time, in the days of Peleg, 2,200 BC. What does it say? That's not a very good. number. Those aren't very good numbers there. We got BC here, and only 2,200 BC. Anyways, it was 150 years after the global flood. 150 years after the global flood. In the days of Peleg, there was a catastrophic continental breakup that occurred, as per Genesis 10:25. The Burckle Crater impact in the Indian Ocean, well, there was no Indian Ocean. The Indian Ocean is a result of the breakup, obviously, because India was connected to Africa and Australia and Antarctica. So there was no Indian Ocean at the time until this breakup. The crater impact triggered the breakup along with the centrifugal force that amplified was probably this impact that amplified India's extreme movement, pushing Eurasia into the Arctic and the Americas. Separation shoved northward, causing tsunamis that preserved Arctic ecosystems. Of course, one of the things I always wondered about since I was a kid, some 60 years ago or whatever, is how the mammoth got frozen. How the mammoth got frozen, which made no sense. Never made any sense to me. Anyways, you have the glacial striations, what scientists call the Earth before the breakup is Gondwana. So you have the glacial striations that stamped the seal on the continents. Okay, we got plus you have the sediment layers with fossils. The sediment layers line up, the fossils line up between continents, indicate rapid tectonics. Well, I don't know if when you put everything together, it indicates rapid tectonics. The east-west animal separation, isolated species like monkeys with prehensile tails in the Americas, fast-moving through the trees. Non-prehensile-tailed monkeys in Africa, Asia. They weren't fast enough to make it to America before the breakup. That's another thing I always wondered, why only prehensile-tailed monkeys in America? Well, they made it to America while the other monkeys didn't. Simple as that. Because it was only 100 years, 150 years maybe. Some say 400 years or whatever, but in the days of Peleg, I think it's more like 100. I counted one time. But anyways, you have American crocodiles, alligators, caiman, greater grisons and honey badgers, otters, possums, snakes, leopards, tapirs, camels, and others across the ocean. Frozen Arctic animals. Come on. See, and you have the frozen Arctic animals. Mammoths, mastodons, lions, bears, wolves, crocodiles. This one surprised me. Didn't know there was frozen crocodiles preserved by tsunamis or buried by tsunamis and or instantly frozen. You have the Tower of Babel and the dispersed tribes after the Tower of Babel defined by shared M168 S&P marker, which the majority of the world has. Only the descendants of Cush and Put do not have an M168, with the exception of Cush's son Nimrod, who is more than likely the oldest son of Cush, who remained in Mesopotamia as king of the world. He retained the M168 because he's probably the oldest son of Cush, while the other sons of Cush and Put do not have this marker. Everyone else in the world does. So they're the odd ones out. Okay, unique S&P markers. That's Nimrod's 130, M130. Okay, 500-year records, prioritizing biblical evidence over D-time assumptions. Okay, so we have introduction here. Global flood was 4,350 BC. So in response to this other problem here, Peleg's time, the days of Peleg were probably like 4,000 BC or more, not 2,200. So anyways, global flood reshaped the Earth's surface. Another thing people don't seem to realize is that the flood over the whole world had the effect of liquefying the sediment layers. They became liquefied and redeposited in layers along with the fossils, or making the fossils. Okay, deposited sedimentary layers and followed by rapid continental breakup during Peleg's time. Burckle Crater impact in the Indian Ocean fractured a post-flood supercontinent. I'm going to have to correct this date. Doesn't make any sense. Centrifugal force drove India's extreme movement. I would say it's more the impact. That's the thing, is that the AI is not able to think very well. It doesn't think very well. It was the impact that drove India's extreme movement. And this number here is wrong if this number here is right. You just can't think for it. You have to think for it. You got to say, well, this is this, and they'll correct it. It or whoever. Okay. Colliding with Eurasia, pushing it into the Arctic. And the Americas' separation from Africa and Antarctic, shoving them forward, triggering tsunamis. The glacial striations were from the glaciers when they were connected to Antarctica. So glacial striations, sediment layers, east-west animal separation, prehensile-tailed monkeys reaching America's non-prehensile monkeys in Africa, American crocodiles, frozen Arctic ecosystems, mastodons, lions, bears provide evidence. Tower of Babel dispersed Noah's 16 grandson lineages, each with a unique Y DNA haplogroup. Nimrod C M130, K M and S M9 defined by shared unique S&P markers. Of course, this is Tubal. Tubal has a common ancestor with all his brothers, obviously, and they all have the M9. It's easy to understand the separation when you understand S&P markers. Defined by shared and unique S&Ps. So everyone has shared S&P markers, except for A and B. And everyone has unique S&P markers, including A and B. Now, the reason why A and B do not share an S&P marker with the rest of the world is to me, can only be attributed to extreme or mutation, and that's also the result of many more generations. So the only reason why I can think of that the A and the B do not share any S&P marker with the rest of the world. So they are the odd ones out. This paper clarifies the native status of American crocodiles in Central America. Oh, that's nice. Everglades and agility-driven dispersal of prehensile-tailed monkeys to Americas aligning with 5,000-year records and rejecting deep time assumptions. So here's the mechanism for the catastrophic plate tectonics and continental breakup. Now, he's going to include people like Baumgartner and a whole bunch of the ICR and stuff, but it's not necessarily their viewpoint. For whatever reason, he's including these in there, but it's not necessarily their viewpoint. Okay. Catastrophic plate tectonics posits that flood-related heat and gravitational potential drove runaway subduction and mantle convection, which I agree. I just don't agree that it was during the flood. I don't agree that it was flood-related. It was after the flood. It had to have been after the flood, after the sediments were deposited, after the glacial striations on what they call Gondwana, which is just the world before the breakup of the continents. But all this subduction and mantle convection and all this stuff happened during the days of Peleg. The Burckle Crater impact shows the position in the Indian Ocean that wasn't an Indian Ocean at the time. It only became the Indian Ocean after the impact, of course. Fractured the Gondwana-like supercontinent. See, now it's saying Gondwana-like supercontinent. That's not too bad. Initiating the faults. There you go. Initiating the fault. See, this is the mechanism. That's the mechanism right there. Centrifugal force accelerated India's extreme movement. Well, it was already moving when it was hit because of the impact. Because of the impact, India is already moving northward, probably literally pushing, not necessarily colliding with, but pushing Eurasia and pushing it into the Arctic. And it drove the Americas' separation. And of course, America broke off from Africa. And as they broke apart, they also, because of the centrifugal motion, they also moved north into the Arctic. So basically, Asia and America and Europe were shoved up into the Arctic, and which caused severe tsunamis, which are the evidence is seen in Europe. And I could include that. I got to maybe include that as well. Subduction sank ocean crust, because the thing about the ocean's bottom, ocean surface, it's all new volcanic spread, all of it. the Indian Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, it's all new surface. And as such, it was spreading apart and probably hardening as it was spreading, but it was spreading apart. And to me, that's not a heat problem. To me, that's just ordinary Earth movements. Now they call it tectonic activity and tectonic plates. But at the time, it was just the spread of the continents and from the opening up between the continents, it opened up between the continents, and that's how the continents moved. Of course, on top of magma that's already there. Of course, there was heat, which also is what formed marble from the sediment layers. And I mean, you have to have heat to form the marble and stuff. And of course, a lot of marble does have fossils in the marble, especially ammonites and belemnites and sponges and who knows what else. As I've had other videos a long time ago that I used to show a lot of those fossils in marble, because there's sediment layers that are fossil, that are turned into marble, and of course the fossils remain in the sediment layers. And so that all the ocean floor is from seafloor spreading. It's all from seafloor spreading. It created the oceans. Well, sometimes Grok can think, I guess, forming modern continents within decades. Within decades, maybe even less. Or that's the position of the continents. We say the position of the continents to where they are today, with very little movement today, because of course the continent, the landmass has reached equilibrium, because it was all lopsided. After the flood, it was lopsided because when the land came up out of the water, but it was all on top of the South Pole, and it was all to one side of the South Pole. So you could imagine the Earth would be going around, be wobbling like crazy, after the water settled and everything. But still, it would have been wobbling, a lot. And then with this impact between India and Antarctica and Australia and Africa, that just caused the breakup, which it was already hardening. The sediment layers were already hardened like concrete. Concrete has two guarantees. It's guaranteed against theft, and it's guaranteed to break up. So all these sediment layers, like concrete, were all hardening around the world, and they were guaranteed to break up. And apparently, there was a strike right in the area that would have broken them up and caused all the seafloor spreading. Of course, the seafloor spreading is important because it does away with a lot of the sediment layers. So the sediments from the Grand Canyon that washed out, all that volume of sediment, that's all gone because of the seafloor spreading from the breakup itself. So the Grand Canyon was probably formed at the time of the breakup, which of course what caused the uplift as the water was draining out. there was uplift, and it just kept on cutting through. So it's probably what happened in the days of Peleg or at that time. Okay, so the evidence. Now we're going to get to the evidence. That was the mechanism. We're going to get to the evidence now. The Burckle Crater impact. The evidence of that is chevron dunes in Madagascar and Australia. Okay, and shocked minerals and quartz and talc formations in India. Oh wow! so it's also in India. We have the talc formations in India. Oh, so that's nice. It's there's evidence in India of the impact. Okay, that's nice. Indicate an impact, triggering India's movement and America's separation. And then it credits AIG, which they don't necessarily agree, maybe. Just giving that as a disclaimer. Gondwana glacial striations. Now, this is very important because before the breakup, during that 100 years or 150 years or whatever it was, there was snow accumulating on the South Pole, which even made the Earth more out of round or oblong, so it's probably wobbling around quite a bit at the time when the glaciers were marking South America, Africa, India, and Australia. So in Africa, you have what looks to be like the center. So I'm thinking, according to the glaciers, South Africa was the center of the whole thing. So I'm thinking that, well, maybe that's true. Maybe Africa was over top the South Pole, and all the glaciers were spreading out from there, north and south. Of course, in South America, it just goes north. Africa, it goes north and south. India just goes north, of course. Australia goes north. But at the breakup, it looks to me like Antarctica was pulled up over the South Pole. So the strike sent India into Asia. And as that was happening, it looks to me like Antarctica was dragged over top of the South Pole. And Africa continued north, Asia continued north, and America continued north. And you can see North and South America broke off from Africa. Both North and South America broke off from Africa. You can see from the Atlantic Ridge that they were both connected to Africa, both North and South America. Okay, so, and of course, if one asteroid hit, another one could have hit too. Maybe it hit the Yucatan Peninsula at the same time, or, roughly the same time. Okay, so we have the Paraná Basin, the Karoo Basin in Africa, the Talchir Formation in India, and the Wynard Formation, reflecting tectonic grinding or flood-related ice flows. Post-flood related ice flows when connected to Antarctica, according to AJ. Or flood-related ice flows. Okay, what happened is this: the glaciers were moving, and they were moving in a direction, and they can tell by looking at the bedrock, which is sediment layers from the global flood. They can tell by looking at the bedrock which direction the ice flows were going. So South America, it's going north, from south to north. Africa, as stated, was going both south to north and south, which at the time might have been north. You know, if you can figure that out. It was over top the South Pole. Both directions were going north in South Africa. So India, they're going north, and Australia, they're going north, showing that they were all connected to Antarctica at the time. Because, of course, India is now north of the equator. And we know that no glaciers can form north of the equator. And so you have all these glacial striations that show they were all connected to Antarctica, which was after the global flood. Had to have been after the global flood, because the sediment layers have to have been deposited first. The continents were still all connected. Glacial formed at the South Pole, going from south to north everywhere. And then it broke apart, and obviously the glaciers melted, but they left the striations from when they were still connected to Antarctica after the sediment layers were deposited. It has to be that way. Can't be any other sequence or series of events. Okay, so sediment layers with fossils, flood strata. Of course, all the flood layers, they line up between the continents. Everyone should know that by now. Okay, Tapete sandstone. The Dwika group contained fossils, trilobites, dinosaurs. Deformed strata indicate rapid compression post-impact. Okay, yeah. So, yeah, it was at the time of the breakup that pushed up the mountains, which they're going to get into. It was obvious in India. The Himalayas obviously are being pushed up from India, being shoved into Asia. And it's the same process that made the Rockies, the Appalachians, and all the other ones. Okay. Scientific challenge. Gondwana. Okay, they're saying it's 180 million years. Striations fossils. Well, it has 300 million years, but obviously not, because after the global flood is when the glaciers were formed. Response is that 5,000-year records and accelerated processes override deep time assumptions, according to AIG. So we got that straight. Formation of the Grand Canyon processes. Grand Canyon formed. Again, this date, there's something wrong with this date, I think. Because the Earth is more than 4,000 years old. Anyway, I have to fix that date. Grand Canyon formed as receding was intensified by the Burckle impact, which I never ever heard before, except somebody mentioned it on one of Donnie's or Matt's channel. Induced tectonics. Okay. So the impact was the probable cause of the induced tectonics. Eroded soft flood sediments. Yeah. A breach dam model carved the Grand Canyon in weeks to months, according to ICR. Yeah, so they're probably soft sediments, and as the soft sediments are being eroded, it probably started to breach at the time of the breakup. It's probably caused huge tsunami in the lake or whatever, and probably just started spilling over and started to trickle. And as the continents were being pushed, of course, you have the rising of the sediment layers. Okay. The uplift, the uplift of the Grand Canyon as the water is spilling out. Okay, sediment subduction and uplift. You have the subduction, Pacific plate subduction, amplified by the impact, recycled sediments destabilizing the Colorado Plateau. So, this is also what caused the Marianas Trench. I don't know if you remember to include that. But as, of course, the Americas broke apart from Africa, as evidenced by the Mid-Atlantic Ridge where they separated, of course, that's going to put pressure on Asia as Asia is going north too and spreading out. So that's what made the Marianas Trench, and it just buckled under. So the Marianas Trench buckled under at that time. Of course, the depth of that trench is the same distance as commercial aircraft fly high. So if you ever see a commercial aircraft up there, we can hardly just barely see it going by. That's how deep the Marianas Trench is underwater. So we got the uplift, continental plate tectonic raised plateau. You have all this lifting. You have all this uplift going on, mountains and everything. Steep wall support. Okay. Fossil-rich layers, dinosaur tracks, deformed strata aligned with the flood. Also, I don't think you remember to include that there's evidence of a dinosaur walking, say, in Africa, in the sediment layers, and then his trail picks up in South America, walking in the same strata, same sediment. So that's evidence of it being together while the sediments are being deposited. Of course, the dinosaur walking from Africa to across to South America, and then sediments built up on top of that. But of course, his footprints are still recorded there. And then, of course, when the continents broke apart, of course, the tracks were separated. Let's see, fossil-rich layers, deformed strata aligned with the flood and the breakup. Scientific challenge, strata. Okay, scientific, but these guys make themselves irrelevant because they ignore known human history. They ignore calendars that are only 5,000 years old. They ignore genealogies. They ignore known human history. They ignore the fact that we all came from Mesopotamia, from the 16 grandsons of Noah. So, of course, they get everything wrong. Of course, everything, they just make themselves irrelevant. So, 5,000-year records prevail. You have uplift of major mountain ranges. Okay, here we go. This is what I was trying to get into before. CPT, triggered by the Burckle impact, formed ranges. You got the Rocky Mountains, Himalayas, Andes, Brazilian highlands on the east coast, Appalachians on the east coast. Of course, the Andes are the west coast, and the Rockies are on the west coast. Well, near the west coast. Okay. So that's what happened with the uplift. And of course, the Grand Canyon was formed at the same time. The subduction removed the sediment from the runoff from the Grand Canyon. Okay, now here's the interesting part. This to me is the most interesting part. You have the Arctic ecosystems, frozen and buried animals. Okay, here we got the mechanism. We know the mechanism already. The continents were pushed up into the Arctic. Okay, that's the mechanism. So what would result from that? You would get tsunamis, which there's a lot of evidence of tsunamis in the north, and entire ecosystems totally buried or frozen, and triggered by the impact, subduction, American separation, and inundated Arctic regions. Yeah, preserving diverse animals and plants, which is some of these I didn't even know about until today. You got the frozen and buried animals, preserved remains in Siberia, Yana Highlands, North America, Yukon, include mammoths. This is both places, by the way. Mammoths, mastodons, woolly rhinos, got bison, horses, musk oxen, lions, bears, wolves. Now this I didn't know. Otters, didn't know. Honey badgers, didn't know. Leopards, I didn't know. Crocodiles, all frozen, buried and or frozen by being shoved up into the Arctic. Now you know they weren't native to the Arctic. So this stuff screams breakup of the continents after the global flood. Now, I always wondered, well, what were the mammoths eating tropical vegetation for? And they got frozen ever since I was a kid. To me, that never made sense. And I knew there had to be a reason. I just didn't know what it was. I couldn't, had no idea of why the mammoths had tropical vegetation in their mouths, and they were frozen instantly frozen. Now, they're not all instantly frozen. A lot of them are buried by tsunamis and frozen, but in many cases, they're quick frozen with tropical vegetation in their mouth, and that never made sense. And the only thing that explains it is the breakup of the continents after the global flood, which also explains honey badgers, leopards, and crocodiles. Now, this if Grok is not trying to pull a fast one on me. This is a North American river otter. Honey badger, which, yeah, this, is this it must be the African honey badger or the Eurasian, whatever one. Well, it's African. Leopards, of course, would be leopards. Crocodiles, 3 meters long, indicating rapid freezing. Temperature, temperate, there we go. Temperate plant fossils, ferns, and birch suggests a pre-breakup warm climate. You got tsunami deposit, Arctic sediment layers, Lena River Delta. You got the Arctic sediment layers of Lena River Delta. Now, I don't know if this is the one in Europe they're talking about, with mixed marine and terrestrial fossils, ammonite and ferns. I'm not sure if that's talking before or after the global flood. They're saying it aligns with tsunami inundation. According to ICR, of course. I don't know, Grok is something else. Scientific challenge, we'll forget about that because they disqualify themselves for doing any science. When I was a kid, I knew more science than they have known their entire lives when I was a kid. And I was the best in my science class. Okay, Burckle is misspelled. Burckle, no, it's a Burckle impact. Okay, separation of animals. Tower of Babel, animal separation. Okay, now we have an animal separation. That was the frozen animals. Now this is the animal separation, not to be confused with each other, even though they have some of the same animals. This is another thing I always wondered about: the monkeys with prehensile tails versus non-prehensile tails. You got the New World monkeys and you got the Old World monkeys. To me, that never made any sense either. So this is my idea. This is original idea here, that the howler monkeys and the spider monkeys and the bahigudus and all of them with a prehensile tail, they're capable of rapid arboreal movement. They're capable of moving through the trees very fast, very rapidly. So they reached America pre-breakup. They reached the Americas before the breakup. And of course, they want to get away from the lions, tigers, and bears too. From a central dispersal point due to their agility. Old world monkeys, baboons, macaques, and stuff without the tail, they're slower in the trees with non-prehensile tails, remained in Africa as the Atlantic formed post-impact. Hey, sounds good to me. Crocodiles, alligators, caimans, American crocodiles, Crocodilus actus. So in South America, you have crocodiles, alligators, and caimans, American crocodiles. Yeah, central or native to Central America. That's right. Okay, South Florida, Everglades, and northern South America, versus the African Asian crocodiles, which are another kind of variation, other variations of crocodiles. And of course, variations have happened early on after the flood, in case a lot of people don't understand it, which I was wondering myself. But what happens is that you have variations of animals. They separate, they move out in different directions, they separate, they encounter different environments, and of course they have different genetic input because they don't have the complete genetic profile. They just have part of the profile, just like a Chihuahua doesn't have the complete genetic profile of a wolf. It has part of it, and they go off and they get all these variations. That's what happened early on, right after the flood. Once they isolated and separated, then you have this diversity. And that happened right away, early on after the global flood. Anyways, you got the American alligators in the Everglades. You got the spectacled caimans, which I used to swim with a lot when I was a kid. Central South America, introduced into South Florida. Apparently not in the Everglades yet. I thought they might be in the Everglades. Well, I didn't know. But what I was referring to was that there's crocodiles, American crocodiles in the Everglades, is what I was referring to. He didn't understand. Okay. So I got the American crocodiles, Central America, Costa Rica, South Florida Everglades, and northern South America. So these crocodiles, they are native to America, and they are in the Everglades, which is what I was trying to tell Rock, but then he says, well, actually, he's clarifying that the introduced ones, he's probably right. The introduced ones are in South Florida, not the Everglades. But the crocodiles are in the Everglades. Okay, I got that straight. Sometimes it's hard to understand because you read something with preconceived ideas of what he's saying, and then you go back, read carefully, and it makes more sense. But you have to read it in succession, the proper order. Okay, then we have the otters. Okay, those are the crocodiles, monkeys and crocodiles. Then you have the otters. This is talking about all the animals that were separated by the breakup of the continents. You have the Eurasian river otter, Lutra, Asia, Europe, versus the North American river otter, Lontra canadensis, and the South American giant otter, Petronura brasiliensis, the neotropical otter, Lontra longicaudis. I guess it's got a long tail. Longicaudis. must have a long tail or something. Anyway, greater grisons versus the honey badgers. How many people knew that the honey badger has an identical counterpart in South America? It's called the greater grison. Greater grison, and there's other variations of grisons too. One of which I have documented in a very poor video on my page. My initial video shows a version of this greater grison, but it's not in the form of a greater grison, because the greater grison looks almost exactly like a honey badger. It's got the same markings on its head, only it's different location. The one I saw had a white head and neck and a black body and tail, but it's the same animal. It's the same animal, just a different variation. So there's more variations in South America than there are in Africa of the honey badger. And it had the one I saw had the same characteristics as a honey badger in that it would mosey around on the ground, and if it was like ever startled or something, it did not run for the trees, because the other animals that aren't the same as a honey badger, the other ones with they got a longer neck and body and tail, and they're very agile, and they just go for the trees right away. It's not the same animal. This is a mustelid. It's aggressive mustelid. So it had the same characteristics as that of the honey badger, but the one that I saw hasn't been documented by science yet. You'll never see a picture of it anywhere, unless maybe somebody does take a picture of it, which I wanted to go back and take a picture of it, but maybe someday I will, depending on the politics in South America. Hopefully they'll get their country back like we got our country back, so maybe everything will work out okay. Okay, so in Africa it's called the Mellivore capinus. This one is called the Galactus vittata, and I guess they couldn't connect the two as being the same animal. They're both aggressive mustelids, and they have the same exact characteristics, behavior, and everything. And of course, it belongs to like similar to skunks, only they don't squirt. They smell, but they don't squirt their smell at you or whatever. But it's similar to a skunk too. But like I said, it's not the same thing. But this greater grison is the same thing as an African honey badger, with more variations in South America than in Africa. Then you have the possums. An Australian marsupial, whatever this is, Phalangeridae. And then you have the American opossums, Didelifidae. And just to make them different, even though it's the same animal in two different places. In fact, they're like 3 or 4 different places, because they're like all over Asia too. But in case everybody's wondering, the ugliest one is the South American, because there's North American and South American possums, which we were supposed to say opossum. But the ugliest one ever, probably the ugliest animal ever, is the South American possum. North American ones aren't that pretty, but the South Americans ones are worse, because they got less hair. They got less hair on them. They're the ugliest thing. Look like a mangy possum or something. I don't know, a mangy rat. Anyways, this is interesting too, which I never paid too much attention to. You got the snakes, the old world pythons, African, Asia. And in the New World, what do we have? We have the boas. they got separated. Of course, in the old world, they're called pythons. New world, they're called boas. Just so it's not the same thing, I guess. But they are the same animal, separated when the continents broke apart. And then, of course, a lot of people may have not thought about this one. You have the African leopards. Incidentally, every other place in the world, they're called leopards. You got the snow leopards, you got the Asian leopards, the African leopards. Only in America, they're called jaguars. Only in America, they're called something different, just to make it different, I guess. But it's the same thing. It's a leopard just like any other leopard. So, and of course, variation happens because you have a different set of genes, a different set of environment. That's why you got snow leopards, you got Asian leopards, and you got African leopards, and who knows where else there's leopards. Probably, yeah, every South Pacific or something, I don't know. Anyways, another one probably nobody ever thought about, but you have the Asian tapirs, and you have Central and South American tapirs. Of course, there's a couple of different types of tapir. I think even within South America, there's a couple of different types of tapirs as well. Okay, you got Indictus, the tapir Indictus, Southeast Asia, and then you got the Baird's mountain tapirs, which the Amazon is not in the mountains. Pinchake. Tapirs, Pinchake in Central South America. And of course, the Amazon is not a mountain tapir. Anyway. Okay, and then we have the camels. We got the New World camels and the Old World camels. They were separated. And of course, the variation is because of the isolation and different set of genes, different set of habitat, different set of habits or food or whatever. You know, that's why they have different kinds of camels. Okay, you got kangaroos, other animals. You got kangaroos, Australia, none in America, dinosaurs, hadrosaurs in the Arctic, megafauna. In South America, Arctic, megafauna, South America. Got rhinos. Oh, in South America, you got rhinos, elephants, giraffes versus none in Americas. Okay, in South America. Oh, rhinos, elephant. This is why you got to get the sequence down right. You got the rhinos, elephants, giraffes in Africa and Asia versus none in America. Yeah, but you're supposed to identify other animals that were separated, not the ones that weren't separated. But I did get the monkeys explained why you have old world monkeys and new world monkeys. Got that down. Makes sense. Other animals, none in America, megafauna, South America. Okay. Yeah. Okay. The evidence, faunal distributions, and Gondwana striations align with a 5,000-year isolation. Yeah. Yeah. Here it's saying 5,000-year isolation. Anyway, which is better than 2,200 BC. The agility of prehensile-tailed monkeys enable their pre-breakup dispersal to the Americas, while non-prehensile-tailed monkeys remain in Africa. according to AIG. Not. Anyways, haplogroup dispersal with S&P markers, post-Babel tribes. Okay, now we have the human dispersals, haplogroup dispersals. Okay, this is easy to understand. If you want to understand the difference between Eurasians, Semitics, and Hamitic, or African, quote-unquote African descendants, that not all of them went to Africa. Some of them never even went to Africa, but they're descendants of Ham. Okay, if you want to understand it, it's easy to understand. Everyone here, except for A and B, has M86. So that includes everyone. Okay, the Semitic descendants have this marker, and the descendants, Eurasian descendants, also have this marker. It's not showing it here, but so Eurasians descended from Japheth and Semitics descended from Shem all have this marker here. The difference between the Semitics and Eurasians is that the Eurasians have this marker here. So it's like their identifying marker. Except there's an IJK marker too. There's an IJK marker, which is 400. I don't see it here. It's 400 something. In my other videos, this explains it. That the IJ shares a marker with the Eurasians, while the other descendants, the H, the G, and the Fs, they don't have the IJK marker that the IJ does have with K, because Arpachshad is the oldest son of Shem, so he can share a marker with his uncle, because his father's the brother of his uncle, and they shared a common ancestor. That's why IJ has the IJK marker, while his younger brothers do not have it. So we have Elam is H, Asher is G, Aram is F1 through 5, F1 to 5, which is a totally different lineage than F1 through 5, is Lud. Both of these, it says Anatolia, that's where it originated from. But both of these Fs are mostly found in India. They're very rare, but they're both found in India because they had trade routes with India. The Arameans controlled the trade routes to India. The Lydians used the trade routes to Indians. Neither the F undefined or the F1 through 5 remain in Anatolia or Levant or anywhere. I mean, they're very, very rare. They might be there, but they're very rare. They're only basically found in India, and they're rare over there. Now, when you look at a genetic mark, it shows all the other nations coming from F, but they don't descend from F. They have a common ancestor with F, which is testified by this M89. So all Semitics have M89, all Eurasians have M89. The Hamitics do not have it. Okay, now this M168 is shared by C, D, and E. So E is Mitzrayim, D is Canaan, and C is Nimrod. They have M168. Now, C, being the oldest son of Cush, is entitled to have this marker, and the A and the B are entitled to have lost the marker. So the A and the B are the odd ones out from the entire rest of the world. They do not share any S&P marker with the rest of the world. And I have to maybe repeat that. The A and B, the A of Put and the B of Cush, the other sons of Cush, not Nimrod, they do not share any marker, any S&P marker with the rest of the world. But the claim is that everyone came from A00. The claim, out of Africa claim, is that everyone came from A00. And they don't even share any marker with the rest of the world, any S&P marker with the rest of the world. Cush has it. I mean, Nimrod has it because he's the oldest son of Cush, which means he retained the marker. All of his descendants retained the marker because it's a marker of his shared common ancestor with the rest of the world. Canaan has the marker. Mitzrayim has the marker, but A and B do not, at least the other brothers of Nimrod. You notice in the Bible, the sons of Cush are like mentioned separately. And in some of the mentions of the sons of Cush don't include Nimrod. That's because Nimrod was the king in Mesopotamia, and he remained in Mesopotamia with all his household, sons and daughters, while Cush moved to Africa, and his other sons did not retain this marker here, nor did any of the descendants of Put retain this marker. That's the way it works because we know who's who. Because of many things, including the colon modal haplotype, which identifies this IJ lineage of Arpachshad. So the colon modal haplotype identifies, of course, Aaron, the tribe of Levi, Jacob, Abraham, Eber, and Arpachshad, which in turn identifies the entire Semitic lineage, all the 5 sons of Shem. Not that they don't have the colon modal haplotype. You know, the eye doesn't have the colon modal haplotype either. It's just the descendants of Aaron that have haplotype, but it identifies all the rest of these lineages as being Semitic, descended from Shem. And they all have this S&P marker. And they do not have this S&P marker. That's what identifies the descendants of Shem. Okay, so, and then the mtDNA, which is maternal non-recombinant DNA, you have N being Japheth, M, Shem, L is Ham. I don't know where this came from. This is wrong. That's wrong. The B lineage, I don't even know why I put that in. The B lineage is Semitic. And it's not only in South America. And it's not belonging to Ham. So just skip that. The mtDNA markers is L, M, and N. The L is Hamitic. M is Eurasian, which is out of order from the Y chromosome. And the N is Semitic. So if the out of Africa is true, that means the Africans produced the Semitic males and Eurasian females, which in turn produced Semitic females and Eurasian males, if the out of Africa is true, which, of course, is not true, and of course, that doesn't make any sense. Evidence, haplogroup distributions. Okay, C, we got in Mongolia, 35%, 40% in Americas. Caimans is Oceania. That's Papua New Guinea, Australia, and Oceania. Migrations from Mesopotamia, Nimrod, CM 217 to Asia, Tubos, KMNS to Oceania, according to family tree DNA. Yeah, well, this is not all the migrations, obviously, but there's also the D. The D of Canaan goes all the way to China. So namesake of Sinim, the land of Sinim, because Sinim is a Canaanite tribe. And then it went to Japan. According to migration pattern, it went to the Andaman Islands first, probably. But then it goes to China. Then it goes to Japan. Then it goes to Tibet. Then it goes up to the Altai Mountains. And there's a reason for the Denisovan finger bone that they found in the Altai Mountains. Either that and or the C haplogroup descendants of Nimrod, which are in the same area. But the people most resembling Denisovans are people in the Philippines and Papua New Guinea, which have Hamitic, of course, Hamitic DNA, mixed with Eurasian, mixed with the K, as we can see here. The KMNS, that's Papua New Guinea. So there we go. We'll skip the scientific challenge because they disqualify themselves as not being legitimate scientists. So we have the conclusion. Yeah, this is a discussion between young Earth creationists. I mean, the old Earth ones can get involved too if they want, but it's a discussion between young Earth creationists. So the conclusion is the continental breakup. This is not right. It's more like 3,200. Yeah, it's more like 3,200. I got a correct graph on that. Initiated by the Burckle Crater impact, amplified by centrifugal force, fragmented a supercontinents via continental plate tectonics. India's extreme movement pushed Eurasia into the Arctic, and the America separation shoved them northward, causing tsunamis, glacial striations. There's a period there. Glacial striations mark Gondwana's breakup. That's why you got to pay attention to breaks in the sense stuff. Glacial striations mark the breakup. They call it Gondwana. That was before the breakup. Sediment layers with fossils support rapid tectonics. Yeah, the sediment layers with fossils show that the layers were already there before they broke up, is what it shows. So the sediments were deposited first, and then there was a breakup. And it has nothing to do with how rapid it was. It was just a breakup, which was probably rapid, but that's irrelevant to when the breakup was. East-west animal separation, isolated prehensile-tailed monkeys, non-prehensile-tailed monkeys in Africa, American crocodiles, Central America, caimans introduced in Florida, which are still American anyways. Caimans are from America, South America anyway. Greater grisons, otters, possums, snakes, leopard, tapirs, camels, and others. The frozen Arctic animals, mammoths, mastodons, lions, bears, wolves, crocodiles, etc. Honey badgers were preserved by tsunamis and or freezing. Babel dispersed tribes with Y DNA haplogroups defined by shared M168, with the exception of A and B, and unique S&Ps like Nimrod's M130. This vivid picture, grounded in Genesis, 5,000-year records, clarifies monkey dispersal and crocodile distributions, rejecting deep time assumptions. Yep, so that's about it. You got the references here. So hopefully everything worked out in my special 1,000 subscriber live stream. Thanks, of course, to all my subscribers. I seriously doubt whether I'll have 1,000 people watching this video. But regardless, I guess it's a milestone. So see what's going on here. If anything's going on. Okay, we got Christian Carpenter. We got Doki Doki. Congrats on 1,000 subs. There we go. We got Christian Carpenter. Wow, this not having too good of a time with there it is for me anyways. Good morning, JJ. Congratulations on the 1,000K. And we have Doki Doki Doki. Doki Bible Club. Hey Jungle, congrats on 1,000 subs. And we got Christian Carpenter. Jeremy. Okay, so thanks everybody for your participation, and especially to the subscribers and everyone listening. You bothered to listen to the whole thing. Maybe you learned something. Maybe you can tell me something. You can go ahead and leave your comments there, and be sure to recommend the video, thumbs up the video, things like that. Open to discussion. I'm not against evidence. This video is full of evidence of the breakup of the continents after the global flood. So anything to the contrary is welcome. Anything for or against is welcome. And God bless everybody. Stay close to God. Pray without ceasing. Draw near to God, and God, the creator of the universe, will draw near to you. God bless everybody. Take care.